She had no idea that a seemingly innocent meeting with a stranger would become the last decision she would ever make. It started with a late-night arrival, a ride to a quiet park, and a brief encounter that should have ended like any other. But as the city slept, something far more sinister unfolded in the shadows. A college student, just weeks away from graduation, vanished without a trace. Her phone went silent. Her social media, untouched. Days turned into a desperate search, until investigators uncovered something far more disturbing than anyone could have imagined. How did a routine trip home turn into a nightmare? And who was the stranger waiting for her that night? Salt Lake City, Utah. June 17, 2019. Mackenzie Lueck, a 23-year-old University of Utah student, lands at the airport just after 1:30 a.m. She's returning from California, where she had attended her grandmother's funeral. Tired but relieved to be back, she texts her mother to let her know she's arrived safely. She orders a Lyft to take her home, but she never makes it there. Instead, she asks the driver to take her to Hatch Park, a quiet meeting spot in the middle of the night. It's an unusual detour, one that raises more questions than answers. When the driver drops her off, another car is already waiting. She gets in willingly. Then, she disappears. Days pass with no word from Mackenzie. Her phone goes silent, her social media untouched. Her family, her friends, and law enforcement launch a desperate search, hoping for any sign of her. But as investigators begin piecing together the timeline, they uncover something far more disturbing than anyone expected: an online connection, a hidden predator, and a night that would end in unimaginable horror. What really happened after Mackenzie got into that car? And who was the stranger she was so eager to meet? This is the tragic story of a young woman's final moments, and the relentless search for justice that followed. Before we dive into this chilling case, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new true crime story. We uncover the most shocking and mysterious cases, stories that will leave you questioning everything. Now, let's get into today's case. Mackenzie Lueck had her whole life ahead of her. At 23 years old, she was studying kinesiology at the University of Utah, with dreams of working in the medical field. She was intelligent, independent, and deeply loved by her friends and family. But beyond her academic ambitions, Mackenzie had a compassionate side, one that often led her to put others before herself. She had been a member of a sorority, Delta Delta Delta, and was known for her warm personality and ability to make people feel at ease. But like many young adults, she also had a private life. A life she kept separate from school and family. And in that private world, she connected with people online. Some who were strangers, some who promised excitement, companionship, or something more. It was in that space that she met the man who would ultimately take her life. Ayoola Ajayi was not who he appeared to be. A 31-year-old man with a complicated past, Ajayi had crafted an image of himself that masked the darker truth. To some, he was a tech-savvy entrepreneur, an aspiring author, and even a former member of the Army National Guard. But beneath the surface, there were cracks, troubling gaps in his story that hinted at something much more sinister. He had a history of disturbing behavior. A former roommate would later recall strange and violent tendencies, and an ex-girlfriend had once filed a police report, claiming he had tied her up in his basement against her will. But those warning signs remained buried, unnoticed by the world. And when Ajayi connected with Mackenzie on a dating app, she had no idea that she was stepping into the orbit of a predator. June 16, 2019. Mackenzie boarded a flight from California back to Salt Lake City, still grieving from her grandmother's funeral. It was a long travel day, and by the time she landed in Utah just after 1:30 a.m., she was exhausted. Most people, after a flight like that, would go straight home. But Mackenzie had other plans. She ordered a Lyft, but not to her apartment. Instead, she instructed the driver to take her to Hatch Park, a dimly lit public space in North Salt Lake. A quiet place. Isolated. The kind of spot where no one would notice if something went terribly wrong. When the Lyft driver dropped her off, another vehicle was already waiting. The driver watched as Mackenzie approached the car and got inside willingly. There was no struggle, no hesitation. Then, the car drove away. And Mackenzie was never seen alive again. The moment Mackenzie Lueck stepped into that car, she was never seen alive again. In the early morning hours of June 17, 2019, the darkness of Hatch Park swallowed her whole. The Lyft driver, who had brought her there, would later tell investigators that she didn't seem afraid. She got into the other vehicle without hesitation, no struggle, no second thoughts. But what happened next would remain a mystery for days. Mackenzie's phone, always active, suddenly stopped responding. No texts, no social media posts. Her friends sent messages that went unanswered. Calls rang, but no one picked up. At first, there was no immediate alarm. Maybe she was catching up on sleep, maybe she just needed time alone. But as the hours turned into days, the silence became deafening. Then, something eerie happened. A new text message was sent from Mackenzie's phone. A single message. But there was something off. It wasn't her usual way of typing. It felt unnatural. As if someone else had written it. Investigators would later uncover something even stranger. Her phone had pinged just miles from the home of the man she had met that night. A man who, just hours after Mackenzie vanished, began erasing every trace of her from existence. The search for Mackenzie led authorities to an upscale neighborhood in Salt Lake City. The house, at first glance, seemed unremarkable, modern, well-kept, nothing to suggest the horrors that lay hidden inside. But behind those closed doors, the walls held secrets. Neighbors would later recall strange things about the house on that quiet street. A man who kept to himself. Windows always covered. And, in the days following Mackenzie's disappearance, something even more unsettling, a foul, burning smell drifting through the air. Then, the backyard. At first glance, it looked normal. But just beneath the surface, buried in a shallow grave, lay the charred remains of a body. It was Mackenzie. Forensic teams moved in, carefully excavating the site. What they found was chilling: human tissue, bone fragments, burned beyond recognition. But among the ashes, something else: a clump of hair, a piece of jewelry, a part of Mackenzie that had somehow survived the fire. And in the garage? A 5-gallon gas canister, a metal burn pit, and a set of blackened ties, evidence of something methodical, something planned. But the man who tried to erase Mackenzie had made one fatal error: he had left behind a digital trail. Phone records revealed that his number had been in contact with Mackenzie just before she vanished. Surveillance footage showed him purchasing a canister of gasoline just days before. And perhaps most damning of all, forensic experts found traces of blood inside his home. Blood that told a story, one of struggle, of fear, of a final moment that no one could have imagined. But there was still one question left unanswered: why? Why had Mackenzie agreed to meet him that night? Why had she trusted him? And what really happened in those final moments before the fire consumed every last trace of her? As investigators pieced together the timeline, one thing became disturbingly clear: Mackenzie never stood a chance. From the moment she stepped into that car, her fate had already been decided. As word spread, the community rallied together. Flyers with Mackenzie's face were posted across the city. Her family made public pleas, begging for information. And then, an eerie detail emerged. Mackenzie had not disappeared without a trace. There was a digital breadcrumb trail. And it led straight to the man she had met that night. Ayoola Ajayi. Authorities quickly dug into his background. A former Army National Guardsman. A self-published author. A man who had once tried, unsuccessfully, to list a spare room for rent in his home. At first glance, he seemed like an average citizen. But when investigators looked closer, the facade began to crack. Phone data placed Mackenzie near his house the night she disappeared. Lyft records confirmed that she had requested a ride to Hatch Park, where she willingly got into another car. That car, they now believed, belonged to Ajayi. But the most damning piece of evidence was still to come. Surveillance footage. Nearby cameras captured an unsettling timeline. A few hours after Mackenzie was last seen, Ajayi was spotted at a local hardware store. He wasn't there for household repairs. He was buying gasoline. The implications were chilling. As suspicion grew, authorities secured a search warrant for Ajayi's home. What they found inside sent chills through even the most seasoned investigators. In his backyard, a fresh patch of disturbed soil. Beneath it, charred human remains. A piece of Mackenzie's belongings, barely recognizable but undeniably hers. Nearby, a burn pit and a 5-gallon gas canister. Inside the house, even more unsettling discoveries: traces of blood, evidence of an attempt to wipe the scene clean, and a chilling, unfinished manuscript, a fictional story, allegedly written by Ajayi himself, about a man who lured a woman to his home, and then made sure she was never found again. But fiction had become reality. On June 28, 2019, authorities moved in. Ajayi was taken into custody, his expression unreadable. During questioning, he was calm, composed, too composed. He denied any involvement, insisting he had never met Mackenzie in person. But the evidence told a different story. Phone records, GPS data, security footage, forensic analysis. The truth was unraveling, and Ajayi's carefully constructed lies were beginning to collapse. Yet, he refused to talk. Detectives pressed him, hoping to understand his motive. Why Mackenzie? Why that night? But Ajayi offered nothing. No remorse, no explanation. Just silence. The case was far from simple. Without a clear eyewitness, prosecutors had to rely on forensic science and digital forensics to prove what had happened. Ajayi had taken steps to cover his tracks, erasing messages, attempting to destroy evidence, and creating confusion about Mackenzie's final moments. And for a brief time, it seemed like the full truth might never surface. But then came the breakthrough investigators had been waiting for. A final forensic sweep of Ajayi's property revealed what had been missed before. Human remains, hidden deeper than first thought. The remains were confirmed through DNA testing. It was Mackenzie. The truth could no longer be denied. Ajayi had not only taken her life, he had attempted to erase every trace of her existence. But in his arrogance, he had left behind just enough evidence to seal his fate. Now, the case was no longer just a missing persons investigation. It was a murder case. And Ajayi was about to face justice. The arrest of Iola Ajayi sent shockwaves through Salt Lake City and beyond. The crime was brutal, calculated, and deeply disturbing. But in the eyes of the law, one question remained: would justice be served? Ajayi was charged with aggravated murder, aggravated kidnapping, desecration of a human body, and obstruction of justice. The weight of the evidence against him was staggering, but still, he refused to admit his guilt. As the case moved toward trial, his legal team worked to delay the proceedings, raising procedural motions and questioning forensic findings. But the prosecution was relentless. They had one goal: to ensure that Mackenzie's killer never walked free again. But then, just as trial preparations were ramping up, there was an unexpected twist. In October 2020, more than a year after Mackenzie's murder, Ajayi made a shocking decision: he pleaded guilty. There would be no lengthy trial, no drawn-out court battle. Instead, in a cold and emotionless courtroom, he admitted to everything. He told the judge that he had planned Mackenzie's murder before she had even arrived at Hatch Park. That he had lured her to his home with the intention of ending her life. That when she walked through his door, she had no chance of survival. But the most chilling detail? He gave no real reason why. His motive remained elusive. There was no history between him and Mackenzie beyond their brief online interactions. No apparent grudge. Just a calculated, senseless act of violence. His confession, while shocking, spared Mackenzie's family from enduring a grueling trial. But it did little to ease their pain. With his guilty plea, Ajayi faced his fate. The prosecution pushed for the maximum penalty, arguing that his crime was so heinous, so deliberate, that he deserved to spend the rest of his life behind bars. In an emotional sentencing hearing, Mackenzie's family spoke out. They described the devastation of losing her, the nightmares, and the emptiness that would never fade. Her father, choking back tears, called Ajayi a monster who had destroyed their world. When it was Ajayi's turn to speak, he offered something unexpected: an apology. He claimed to be remorseful, claimed he wished he could take it all back. But his words fell flat. They felt hollow, calculated, like another manipulation in a long line of deceptions. The judge didn't hesitate. He was sentenced to life in prison with no possibility of parole. Ajayi would never walk free again. Mackenzie's murder struck a nerve with the public. News outlets covered every development, from her disappearance to Ajayi's arrest and sentencing. But beyond the headlines, a deeper conversation was brewing. The dangers of online interactions. The hidden threats lurking behind seemingly normal profiles. The false sense of security that many young people feel when meeting strangers through apps and social media. Mackenzie's case wasn't just another crime story, it was a wake-up call. In the aftermath of the case, safety advocates pushed for greater awareness about the risks of online dating. Universities and organizations began discussions on digital safety, emphasizing the importance of background checks, location sharing, and trusting instincts. For Mackenzie's family, the loss was unbearable, but they hoped her story would save others. That no one else would suffer the same fate. And so, even though her life was stolen far too soon, her story lives on, a tragic reminder of the unseen dangers in our digital world. Mackenzie Lueck's murder was not just another case in the headlines. It was a wake-up call, one that shattered the illusion of safety many people take for granted when navigating the digital world. This case revealed an uncomfortable truth: the greatest dangers sometimes come not from the shadows, but from the people who present themselves as ordinary, trustworthy, and unthreatening. Mackenzie was smart. She was independent. She was cautious. And yet, in one moment, she was lured into a situation she never could have escaped. How did this happen? And more importantly, how can we stop it from happening again? Meeting people online has become second nature. With a simple swipe, a text, or a video chat, we make connections instantly. We tell ourselves that we can spot red flags, that we're in control. But Mackenzie's story proves otherwise. Ayoola Ajayi didn't seem dangerous. He wasn't an obvious threat lurking in the dark. He was charismatic, well-spoken, and seemingly successful. He knew how to present himself in a way that made people feel at ease. But underneath that polished exterior was something far more sinister. How many others have walked into similar traps, unaware that they were stepping into danger until it was too late? Even with Ajayi behind bars, there are questions that still linger. Why did he do it? Was this premeditated, or was it an act of impulse? Authorities believe Ajayi planned Mackenzie's murder before she ever set foot in his home. But why her? What was it about Mackenzie that made her his target? Was she the first? Investigators found evidence that Ajayi had attempted to lure other women in the past. His internet search history painted a chilling picture: research on kidnappings, methods of disposing of a body, and past criminal cases similar to his own. Was Mackenzie simply the first victim he was caught for? If she hadn't gone missing, if her family hadn't raised the alarm so quickly, would he have struck again? These are questions we may never have the answers to. This case forces us to confront an unsettling reality: how easily trust can be manipulated. Mackenzie likely thought she was in control of her situation. She had spoken to Ajayi before, made plans, and taken a ride to meet him. There was nothing overtly suspicious about their arrangement. But it only takes one miscalculation, one misplaced trust, for everything to change. It makes you wonder, how many times have we found ourselves in situations where we assumed we were safe? Where we got into a stranger's car, shared personal details with someone we barely knew, or trusted that a meeting in a public place would prevent anything bad from happening? How many of us would have made the same choice Mackenzie did that night? And how many of us would have realized the danger only when it was too late? Mackenzie's story is more than a tragic headline, it's a lesson in how easily perception can be deceived. She wasn't reckless. She wasn't careless. She was simply a young woman who, like so many others, believed she could handle herself. Her case serves as a stark reminder to be vigilant, to question what seems too easy, too comfortable, or too safe. Because sometimes, the real danger isn't the unknown, it's the familiar. The ordinary. The people who blend in so well that we never see them coming. And that is the most terrifying part of all. Mackenzie Lueck's story is a heartbreaking reminder of how fragile life can be and how quickly trust can be exploited. A bright, ambitious young woman, just weeks away from a new chapter in her life, was lured into a nightmare she never could have imagined. Her disappearance sparked national headlines. Her tragic fate sent chills through communities across the country. And her case forced us all to reconsider the hidden dangers of our digital world. What do you think truly motivated Ayoola Ajayi? Was this a crime of opportunity, or was there something even darker behind his actions? Could this tragedy have been prevented? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. If you found this case as chilling as I did, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you never miss a new episode. In our next video, we'll be diving into another shocking case, a crime so disturbing, it left even seasoned investigators questioning everything they thought they knew. Stay tuned, because this next story might be even more unsettling than the last.